It doesn't matter who we are. What matters is our plan for storage and seating.
Hello friends, Odin here welcomes you back to the show, and today we're building a banquette. As you may recall from a previous video, I made the mistake of not cutting away the molding before removing it from the wall. This led to some paint peeling away, and it was just no good. I'm pleased to report, however, I do learn from my mistakes. I'm also trying to save this shoe molding because I'm going to reuse it later. So at this point, all I'm really doing is prepping the space, removing the shoe molding as carefully as possible, cutting away the paint, and making sure I preserve the material as well as I can. Now, because I want the banquette to sit flush with the wall, I'm measuring out the length of the wall, which is 16 inches, and subtracting 3/4 of an inch. This will help account for the plywood that's going to sit on the face of the banquette. On the right hand side, there's still shoe molding that goes all the way the length of the wall, so I'm cutting out the dimensions for the banquette itself. Nice and straight. And earlier, when I said I learned from my mistakes, apparently that was a lie, because I stripped some paint off. But that's okay. Now we're going to start cutting out the dimensions for our floor frame. Nice. As I mentioned in a previous video, it's always important to account for the width of the blade. This way, you'll get exact cuts. So now, let's construct our floor frame. Because this wall is so long, what I'm doing is constructing two separate frames and going to connect them together in the middle once they're in place. The same will go for the top. In total, I'm making 4 of these rectangles. And this, boys and girls, is why you want those exact cuts. This floor frame is tight as a glove, and that extra compression strength will just add to the structural integrity. I probably could have left the linoleum flooring underneath my floor frame and banquette, but I'm going to be honest. I hate this floor. So ripping it up and destroying it was a bit therapeutic for me. As you can see, there's a bit of a gap between the floor frame and the end of the linoleum. Again, we want to account for that plywood face as well as the new shoe molding. Now I'm just mounting this floor frame into the subfloor itself. I really don't want this thing to move. Perhaps this is where I start to overbuild this project, but I don't care. I want this thing to last. So I'm just going around looking for the studs in the wall. Yes, this banquette will be one with the wall. Now that the studs are all marked out, I have a good idea of where I'm placing these columns. Since my house is a newer build, these are exactly 16 inches on center. Now I'm just tacking the columns into the floor frame with framing nails and then putting a nail in each stud. I skipped over the stud that's holding the electrical outlet in place for a reason. Mainly, I really don't want to put a nail through an electrical wire. Quick inspection from my engineer, and we're on our way. After I've checked the columns that everything's level, I'm going to go ahead and start mounting the top frames. I'm attaching both of these top frames together with 3-inch construction nails. And don't worry, before I tack all of these into the columns, I'll go ahead and make sure there's contact with all of the columns. Pretty good. Now onto the face of this bench. I'm using 3/4-inch sanded plywood. I find that it's a good median between the really nice veneered plywood and the rough cut stuff. We are going to be painting this after all. Here's why I accounted for that 3/4 of an inch. Nice and flush with the wall. With my supervisor breathing down my neck in the background, I have to make sure this is perfect. All I'm doing is attaching this face frame into each of these studs. If you've made it this far, perhaps I can bestow some wisdom upon you. If I wind back the clock on my life, never in a million years did I think I would be capable of building something like this or the Gothic library I built in a previous video. But here we are. I can assure you I don't do these things professionally. In fact, for my day job, I sit in front of a computer all day. So why am I telling you this? Because all knowledge and skills acquired throughout your life started at a point where you knew nothing about it. My point is, if you come across something in your life that you feel is impossible or very difficult to achieve, I want you to ask yourself one question. Why can't I? Why can't I do this? The truth is, you can. Learn to take a chance on yourself. If you're trying to get to 100 and you're starting at 0, just get to 1 first. Then get to 2, then to 3, then to 10, and so forth. And while there's no guarantee that you get to 100, I promise you this. If you don't try, you'll never even get to 1. Nothing good ever happens when you're sitting in the comfort zone. Take risks on yourself, learn new skills, try new things, put yourself out there. Most things that I've learned in my life were from trying and failing. But guess what? I'm still here. I'm of the mind that the very best investment you can make in your life is not in an index fund. It's not in a 401k. It's in yourself. So go forth, take risks, and get to 1. One day you'll wake up and you'll be at 100. And now that I've successfully built a soapbox in this video as well as a banquette, let's get back to our build. Since I had that pesky electrical outlet sitting behind the banquette itself, I decided that instead of messing with the electricity, it would just be best to extend it. I knew I would continuously have access to that outlet, so I just got an extender. If you're not sure about something when it comes to electrical, please don't try to take risks there. Consult a professional. As we near the end of this build, you can see this thing really start to take shape. Since I used cabinet fasteners, I had to recess them a little bit with a Forstner bit. This particular piece of trim will be used as the handle to open the base. Open sesame. Here's a little trick that I learned from finishing furniture. If you're using rough cut lumber, chances are there's still a lot of grains hidden inside. Spray it down with a little bit of water, allow it to dry, and then sand. That way, when it comes to applying primer and paint, you won't be left with raised grains. Now that all of the holes are filled, the grains are popped, we're going to move to sanding. And more sanding. As Dick Marcinko once said, the more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in combat. The same is true for the steps you take before you apply any kind of finish on your piece. Sanding is essential. You may hate it, and guess what? I do too. But we're going to do it anyway because it'll make all the difference in our end result. My primer of choice is a shellac-based finish because it dries quick and I'm familiar with the material. We want to get a really good coat on this thing. I'm not super worried about getting primer on the walls because I will touch them up later. In case you're wondering, that black paint in the back is an acrylic latex paint by Sherwin-Williams called Iron Ore with a satin finish. You probably recognize it from the bookshelf build that I did in a previous video. Now for the first coat of paint. I will end up doing several coats, 2 to be exact, to get a nice finish on it. The color of choice is Agreeable Gray by Sherwin-Williams. It's also an acrylic latex paint with a satin finish. For wood in particular, you may want to use a semi-gloss because it has more enamel in it, but this Agreeable Gray is the same color as the wall, and I really wanted it to blend in. Now for our bench back. I procured these HDF panels from my local big box store and painted them Sherwin-Williams rosemary color with a semi-gloss. Now I'm just tacking them in with some brad nails, because that's all you really need with this. After I cleaned up the previous shoe molding, I'm going to go ahead and reattach it. And because I didn't want the top of this HDF exposed, I decided to put some top trim on it as well. Originally, I was going to paint the top trim green, but found the raw wood was a really good look. So all I did was hit it with some Sutherland Wells polymerized tung oil and called it a day. There's a certain satisfaction with doing something and doing it well. This banquette in particular will serve as both extra seating and storage, and will eventually have a 7-foot long solid oak banquet table in front of it. Bring on the family gatherings. Thank you for watching this installment of Master of None. and I'll see you next time.